A great start by David Peterson helped the Mets outlast Paul Skenes and win a sloppy game late in walk-off fashion.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now, Monday brought a tough test of the New York Mets, one of the best pitchers in baseball, if not the best, and that is Paul Skenes. Never easy to beat an ace of this caliber, but the Mets found their way to a victory. They outlasted Skenes, and David Peterson was outstanding, matching him every step of the way. I will talk about the walk-off in the next segment and what the later innings brought, which was a little bit of a sloppy game in the end. But for the first 6 innings, it was just your classic pitcher's duel. Each guy going out, handling whatever traffic came their way, but always getting the big outs when they needed to and getting out of every single jam. And for Peterson, that started in the first inning. On yesterday's show, when I was previewing this series, I talked about some of the guys that were in that Pirates lineup that mash left-handed pitching, guys that Peterson would have to be careful of. Andrew McCutchen, Joey Bart was the big one. Joey Bart was hitting .464 against lefties going into this game. So in the first inning, he gets the first 2 guys out, but then Peterson walks McCutchen and Bart, pitching carefully to those guys as he should, try not to get burned by one swing. He then gets a big strikeout to strand both of those runners. Now, speaking of getting burned by one swing, that did happen to Peterson in the second inning, gives up a leadoff homer to Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. I would say this was the one mistake of the game for Peterson, as they were set up low and away, and instead he throws his changeup low and in, and Falefa just turns on it and hits a solo homer. But Peterson settles in. He was able to get through that second inning, and he starts a string there where he retires 10 batters in a row from the second inning all the way through until the 5th inning when he gives up a 1-out double. Brett Beatty made a great defensive play in that 5th inning to keep a run from scoring, makes a diving stop on what could have been a base hit that might have scored the runner from second, gets the out at first, and there's another ground ball that Beatty is ranging to his left of field, deflects off his glove. He's unable to make the play. Obviously, it trickles away, but luckily Francisco Lindor was able to get there before the runner even thought about coming around to score. And with runners out the corners, David Peterson needed a big strikeout. He was going up against a good hitter in Brian Reynolds. Peterson got that strikeout and really showed the emotion after it, roaring as he got off the mound. You don't always see David Peterson get that animated. He's a guy that at times can be, he stays within himself through his starts, always kind of cool, calm, and collected. That was a big moment. He knew it was, because it was a tight game, and every single out that you get against Paul Skenes, the later you can push yourself throughout a start without giving up the runs and keeping the game close, it just gives your team a chance. And that's what David Peterson did. He gave the Mets a chance to win a game late, because on the other side of it, Paul Skenes was outstanding. And you look at the comparative lines, through 6 innings, David Peterson allowed 1 run on 5 hits, walked 3, struck out 7. For Skenes, through 6 innings, he allowed 6 hits, 1 run, walked 3, struck out 6. So through 6 innings, he really played Paul Skenes to, pretty much an even heat there. It was in the 7th inning that they left Peterson out there 1 batter too long, and I'll talk about that in the next segment. But on the other side of things, you look at what the Mets did against Skenes, and yes, they only put up the 1 run. But I thought they made him work. And it's crazy that you can make a pitcher work as hard as I think Skenes had to in a couple of these innings, and yet he never, has the inning where the pitch count escalates to a point where you get him out of the game early. Getting him out of the game early was getting him out through 6. because the way that Skenes can dominate, I mean, you can see how he'd have the ability to go 7-8 innings, with ease. If a team is overly aggressive and just trying to hit these impossible fastballs and the splinker and everything else and just putting the ball on the ground a bunch, where he could cruise through a game. And so the Mets had to be disciplined in their approach. And there was a couple times where it felt like they had him on the ropes and Skenes just made the big pitch every time he needed to. The first time that came was in the first inning, where Francisco Lindor gets a leadoff single, and then Juan Soto draws a walk. So you got a couple of guys on, the best hitter in the National League coming up in Pete Alonso. And Alonso had a pretty, hard-fought at bat. He, ended up seeing 6 pitches, and on that 6th pitch, unfortunately, he hit a hard ground ball right to the shortstop. Taylor-made double play, and that allowed Skenes to really escape that inning as he would strike out Brandon Nimmo to strand a runner at third. That was the first of 2 big double plays that Skenes would get. The second one came in the 6th inning. It was the final couple outs of the day for Skenes. In between, the Mets got runners on base in each inning except for the third, when Lindor, Soto, and Alonso went down in order. In the 4th inning, Brandon Nimmo hit a leadoff double. Then after Mark Vientos struck out, Jeff McNeil ripped the double into the right field corner to tie the game. It is wild that Jeff McNeil is the Mets' best answer against Paul Skenes. Last year, it was McNeil that hit the solo homer against Skenes that shocked us all. And here he was driving in the 1 run the Mets would get off of Skenes with that double. 6th inning, Mark Vientos doubled. His second hit of the day off of Skenes. He had a base hit earlier in his first at bat. Jeff McNeil then worked a 1-out walk. You had a couple runners on for Francisco Alvarez, and that is where that second double play of the day came in. The inning-ending double play that got Skenes out of another jam. He was at 92 pitches through 6 innings. The Pirates got their bullpen up, and it was a job well done for the Mets offense to put themselves in a position where they had 3 chances against the Pirates bullpen to win a game late. And what a crazy finish to that game between the Mets and the Pirates. I want to spend a whole segment on the final 3 innings because so much happened, from Carlos Mendoza making what I view as a questionable managerial decision, sending David Peterson back out there for the 7th inning when you knew Jose Butto was the guy that was going to pitch behind him, to some defensive miscues, but also an incredible defensive play, some clutch hitting. I'm going to go through it all in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Maybe you're looking at the Mets game today and you like Kodai Senga's strikeout number. You can combine the over on Senga strikeouts with maybe, the Mets and winning the game. And if you feel Pete Alonso is going to homer, you put it all together, you create a crazy same-game parlay, and maybe you win big if everything happens. Or you can keep it simple. Just bet on the Mets to win, maybe bet on the Knicks to win their next game over the Celtics, whatever it is. If you're new to FanDuel, this is the perfect time to sign up, because when you head to FanDuel.com, you place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Well, let's talk about the last 3 innings of this game, because they were action-packed. It was wild, this finish. It all starts off with the decision to send David Peterson back out there for the 7th inning. Now, Peterson was at 90 pitches, and if he has 105 to 110 pitches to give, you can make an argument that Carlos Mendoza makes the right decision because his bullpen was taxed. No Ryan Stanek, no Edwin Diaz, no Reed Garrett, so you were already behind the 8 ball, and you have to figure out how to get 9 more outs. If Peterson can get you 3 more, it's huge. I understand in some respects what Mendoza was thinking, but I also know what I've been saying on this show for weeks, which is there is not a single circumstance where it makes sense to put Jose Butto in a position where he has to go out there and it's not a clean inning, where he has to come in with inherited runners on. And again, as I've said on this show, under any and all circumstances, this is a circumstance. Yes, bullpen's taxed. Peterson has some pitches to go. Here's what I'll tell you for certain. Jose Butto's first pitch in a clean inning will be better than David Peterson's 91st pitch. And if Jose Butto comes into a clean inning, he has proven he can get you two. If he comes in there with a runner on base, he's going to implode in some way and things are not going to work out for you. And here is the evidence on that. All of this narrative that I've been talking on the show about Butto really started on April 27th. It's something that I had been mentioning, but it really came to a head on April 27th. Mets versus Nationals. Tyler McGill has a great start, allows 1 run through 6 innings. They throw him back out there for the 7th in a game where the Mets were winning. I think it was 7-1 at the time. He gives up a double, gets a strikeout, then gives up a base hit to score a run. Here comes Butto in a 5-run game. At the time, Jose Butto had really struggled with those inherited runners. It was 4 out of the first 6 inherited runners that he had, inherited, had scored. Okay, so he hadn't been straying anyone. He comes on, gives up that inherited run, then 3 of his own, gives up a big home run, and it's 7-6. Mets still hold a narrow lead in the 9th inning of that game. Ryan Stanek blows it. Nationals walk it off and win. So then after that game, 5 of the first 7 inherited runners he had gotten throughout the season had all come around and scored. And even worse, when you look at his stats, when he inherited traffic, Jose Butto at the time had allowed 12 hits and 4 walks in 7 innings pitched, and he had given up 6 of his own runs, along with the 5 inherited. So in situations where Butto came in with traffic on the bases, 11 runs had scored. When he had gotten a clean inning at the time for that early part of the season, up until April 27th, he had issued 3 walks, 4 hits, and only 1 run in 8 innings pitched. Since then, Carlos Mendoza has only been throwing him out there in clean innings. Next time out, after that disaster of a game, he pulls David Peterson at 85 pitches in an 8-1 game. Peterson could have gotten another inning, but Carlos Mendoza made the wise decision to let Butto have a clean 6th inning. He responded with 2 scoreless and hitless innings, striking out 4, walking just 1. Next time out, again, it's a clean inning that he starts with. He ends up pitching 2 scoreless again. Same thing in the 3rd outing after the disaster. All of them, 2 innings pitched, 2 scoreless each time. His most recent outing came on Friday in a Mets blowout victory. He came on in the 9th inning, again a clean inning. He did give up a solo home run, but he also struck out 3 batters in that inning and looked really sharp to finish off that game. So now you look at the numbers. And when he has a clean inning this year, it's now up to 2 earned runs allowed in 15 innings of work, 10 hits, 6 walks. Now after tonight, the numbers don't look as good when you're talking about what he has done when he inherits traffic, because again, another inherited runner comes around to score. He comes with a runner on first base, gets a strikeout. He then balks the runner who had stole second base previously. He attempts a 3rd pickoff, and that is due to the new rules, or the rules that came into place last year, the 3rd disengagement. So the runner goes from 2nd to 3rd on that pickoff attempt balk. He then walks a batter. So now he's got runners at the corners. 1 out. Now, granted, he does get a double play ball potentially, or I can't even call it double play ball because Lindor actually makes this play. He gets a ground ball, but just based on where it was hit, where the Mets were fielding their positions, it was just an impossible double play to turn. So the run comes in to score. Granted, he gets another ground ball to get out of it. So Jose Butto did not pitch terrible in this one. The balk was atrocious, but ultimately he walked 1, gave up a couple of ground balls, and got a couple of ground balls. I just feel like had Carlos Mendoza started with Butto, they would not have given up a run there. And Jose Butto, because of that, whatever mental thing that he has when it comes to coming in with traffic, he might have been able to pitch 2 innings. And in a second, we'll talk about what happens in the 8th inning. Daniel Nunez nearly gives up a home run, and even though he pitched a scoreless inning, he still didn't look particularly good anyway. So you might have been able to avoid putting Daniel Nunez into a 1-run game had you started with Butto, because who knows, Butto might have pitched 2 innings for you then and just bridged the gap right to Huascar Brazipan. Because yes, ultimately he didn't give up a double or a home run, but the first 2 batters that he faced were laborious at bats. Yes, he got a strikeout on the first one, But then he walked a batter. It was 16 pitches to get through the first 2 batters. And he still only had 1 out. And so I just continue to harp on that you can't put Butto out there with any traffic. And even in this circumstance, when you're trying to steal outs, it's better to just go right to Butto because he might give you 2 innings. And if you don't give him that clean inning, who knows what you're going to get. Granted, it was a tough decision for Carlos Mendoza. I don't want to rip him too much because, again, he's just trying to get through. He didn't have a lot of cards to play in this one. So it really is remarkable that the Mets were able to win this game when you think about the circumstances that they faced. First off, going up against Paul Skenes, but then only having half of your bullpen available, and it's not the good half. So it's a point that I like to hammer home because Butto just can't be in those spots. At the same time, tough spot for Mendoza to be in anyway. Now, the Mets are able to erase that run that was allowed and get a lead in the next inning because they score a couple runs thanks to speed. Tyrone Taylor gets hit by a pitch, steals second base. Luisangel Acuna hits a ground ball to the right side, so he advances the runner, nobody out. That's exactly what you want to do, situational hitting. But it also pulls the first baseman off the bag, and Acuna is able to beat the pitcher to the base, and he gets a hit out of it. So now you got runners at the corners and a great spot. Top of your lineup coming up. Francisco Lindor strikes out. Juan Soto hits a nubber that he hits so softly down the first base line that the Mets were able to score a run, and the only play for the Pirates was either to let that ball go foul and run the risk that Juan Soto might hit a 3-run homer against you, or field it, take the out, and hope you exit the inning with a tie game. That didn't happen, though, because then Pete Alonso hits a hard ground ball to third. Brian Hayes, a play that he typically makes, not ruled an error, but I think he still should have gotten it. Hits off of his glove, and then incredible coaching by Mike Sarbaugh to send Acuna to score from second base on a ball that barely leaves the infield. And Acuna, great speed. Also, the Mets get some help by Henry Davis, who waits back and stays behind the plate to get that throw. And that gives Acuna the little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of an opening that he needs to get his hand in there and give the Mets a go-ahead run at the time. Now, that go-ahead run would not hold because in the 9th inning, the Mets played some sloppy defense. Before that, though, they played some great defense as Brandon Nimmo robbed the home run in the 8th inning that Daniel Nunez would have given up. Again, Nunez didn't look great, but he got 3 outs. We'll see. The progression of Nunez is something we'll continue to follow. This one, at least he didn't walk anybody, and he was able to mostly attack the zone. There were some pretty bad misses mixed in there, but the Mets survived the 8th. 9th inning with Huascar Brazoban in to try to get the save. Alex Canario, you remember him? He leads off the 9th with a single. I would like to mention for all the Mets fans that were really upset that they couldn't hold on to Canario, he has a 565 OPS so far this season. So thought I'd throw that in there. Now, Brazoban gets a double play ball that could have erased. It was then a pinch runner, but the base hit. Brazoban gets a ground ball. Francisco Lindor ranging to his left, hits off the end of his glove. Error by Lindor. Everyone's safe. Sack bunt puts both runners in scoring position. Mets draw their infield in. Brazoban gets another ground ball. This one to Luisangel Acuna, who at this point was playing third base. Acuna can't come up with it. Boots it. Almost makes a spectacular recovery to get it out at first. It was ruled out in the field, but then reversed on review. So the Mets don't get that out. And they have runners at first and third. Tie game. Again, the Mets are going to play their infield in. Carlos Mendoza goes out there, talks to his infield, runs through all the situations. Hard hit ground ball again. This time, Jeff McNeil fields it cleanly, and it ends up being a perfect tailor-made double play. He makes the right play, doesn't come home with it, goes to second base. Lindor gets there, turns 2, and the Mets escape with a tie game, and that sets up the walk-off in the 9th inning. You have Luisangel Acuna strikes out to open things up, but Francisco Lindor reaches on an error. Juan Soto gets jammed and still hits the baseball 106 miles per hour on a line off the bat into right center field for a single. Lindor goes first to third. Pete Alonso comes up with an opportunity to walk things off the sacrifice fly. Has a great at-bat, is patient, works a 3-1 count, gets a pitch that he can hit, and he drives a fly ball to right field to score Lindor. So a really great victory by the Mets to just, again, win under some bad circumstances. They did not have the best recipe for a victory with the bullpen set up the way it was, or not being set up well with having to battle Paul Skenes, and they survived it. They survived some poor defense where they could have gotten out of that ninth inning without having to walk it off. But luckily, their defense was able to make the big play when they needed to, with Jeff McNeil able to turn two there to get you in the situation where one run wins it in the ninth. And you get fortunate. Pirates make an error on Lindor. Soto gets a hit, and Alonso is able to come up clutch. So great win by the Mets, and now it really sets them up well to sweep this series. I'm going to talk about that a bit to close out the show, but really I want to focus in on a couple of injury updates as well as some minor league promotions and a really great story that I want to tell about one of the Mets' top prospects. We will get to all of that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. If you are an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways, and you get the live graphics into your phone each day so it knows when the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description and go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So when you look at the rest of this series, the Mets have a massive advantage over the Pirates. It's Kodai Senga going tonight against Mitch Keller. Keller's got an ERA over 4 this season. Senga would be the ERA leader in the National League if he was qualified. He's got a 1.16 ERA. Huge edge to the Mets, and I think they have a huge edge in the final game as well, as it'll be Bailey Falter versus Clay Holmes. Falter also has an ERA over 4 this season. Holmes has an ERA in the high 2s, and as I talked about on yesterday's show, ever since the first series of the season, the Mets are 14-0 when Griffin Canning or Clay Holmes takes them out. So you feel really good about their ability against a bad team to finish off this homestand strong, potentially get a sweep, and then they will head on the road, but still in town, to face the Yankees over the weekend before they go to Fenway. So some much tougher tests ahead. The Mets better capitalize. Now let's go through the injury updates and the minor league promotions because there is a lot of news to discuss. Paul Blackburn made his latest rehab start on Sunday for Syracuse. He went 3 innings. He allowed 3 runs on 4 hits, walked 3, struck out 2, was up to 60 pitches, and did 4 up downs as he went out there to start the 4th inning, gave up a leadoff single, and was then pulled. So Carlos Mendoza was asked about where Blackburn's at. He said he would make another rehab start on Friday, which will be on 4 days rest. And then we'll see where he's at. Earlier in this rehab process, Carlos Mendoza talked about getting Paul Blackburn up to 75 pitches. Again, he was at 60 in this most recent one. The outing before that, he was up to 56, so they've kept him right in that 60 range. It'll be very curious to see how many pitches he throws on Friday, because if he gets up to 75, theoretically, he could be ready for a return. But the Mets won't need a 6th starter for Kodai Senga until June 5th. They have enough off days throughout the rest of this month. Every single Thursday, they have a day off, and Senga is set up that he will always get to take advantage of that off day. So with that said, the Mets could just let this ride and have Paul Blackburn in rehab start purgatory, have him make 3 more rehab starts, one on this Friday, the next one on the 21st, the next one on the 26th, and then maybe he's good to go for a start at some point before June 5th, and you just sort of push the rotation back whenever you slide him in. Or if you want to, after he makes this most recent rehab start, you could always pitch him out of the bullpen for a little bit. Maybe he replaces Daniel Nunez, who hasn't looked great. I don't really know which way the Mets are going to go with this one. I really don't know. So at this point, you just let each rehab start, take place and see what the Mets decide to do after them. I personally am not in a rush to see Paul Blackburn back on this roster. I'm really not. He hasn't even thrown the ball particularly well in these rehab bags in the minor leagues, so I don't know why he's going to hit the ground running when he's back up at the big league club. I'd let him make at least 2 more rehab starts and just kick the can down the road, because sometimes these things end up solving themselves. You don't want to wish or expect another injury, but you just never know what's going to happen. So, or a setback, but at this stage, I would still have a couple more rehab starts for Blackburn just to, again, kick the can down the road and wait until you really need a 6th starter before you call on him. Now, besides Blackburn, we got another update, and that was Manaea, who, according to Carlos Mendoza, has thrown off the mound. He just did so either yesterday or the day before. He threw 15 pitches off the mound. Does that mean that he is anywhere close to return? No. He still has to build up from that. I'm sure it was probably just 15 fastballs. He might have even been throwing light. I think he's still pretty far away. Once he actually starts a rehab assignment, then we can, perk up a little bit and start to dream about when he's going to return. For now, though, I still don't expect Sean Manaea to come back until late June at the earliest, but at least he isn't having any more setbacks, at least right now. We'll knock on all the wood we got here, and hopefully he can have a smooth process from here. Let's talk about promotions. Port St. Lucie, 3 pitchers are moving on up. You have Ramon Gomez, Matt Allan, and Nate Dom. You look at, or Dome, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name just yet, but we'll start off with Gomez. Gomez made a name for himself because he's the guy that threw 104.5 miles per hour. He pitched 13 innings in Syracuse, struck out 20, walked 10, allowed just 1 earned run, but 6 runs overall. I'll be very curious to see how he translates to a higher level of competition, because you just imagine a guy that's throwing over 100 miles per hour and well over 100 miles per hour against a lot of teenagers and young prospects that are still finding their way in low A. It's going to be very hard for any of those guys to catch up to Gomez. So we'll see what it looks like as he moves on, but definitely an intriguing arm to keep our eye on, a guy that I think is ultimately going to be a reliever, but did make some starts in St. Lucie. Matt Allan, obviously the biggest name of these 3. He made 7 starts, but only pitched 15 innings. They're still keeping him around 25 to 30 pitches per outing. They obviously have, the bubble wrap on him. They want to make sure that he stays healthy, and rightfully so, considering the journey he's been on. But he struck out 17 in those 15 innings, walked 11, gave up 6 runs, has a 3.60 ERA, or had a 3.60 ERA in St. Lucie. I'm very interested to see what it looks like as he moves along to Brooklyn and faces some tougher competition. And I'll be curious if at any point this year, will the Mets stretch him out a little bit more, or will this just be the mode for the rest of the season? Have him pitch on a starter schedule, but only pitch a couple innings and 30 pitches at a time. We'll see what they do with Matt Allan. The final one, again, Nate, we'll call it Dome for now, as I still need to learn that name. Mets third rounder from last year, made 7 starts in St. Lucie, struck out 34 in 28 in the third innings pitched, had a 3.18 ERA. So he was doing a good job there in St. Lucie, had some success as a fully stretched out starting pitcher. Now with some promotions that have already happened this season, where you've seen a couple guys go from Brooklyn to Binghamton. Zach Thornton was one for sure, who was starting and had a great beginning to the season in high A and is now at the double A. You're seeing that progression of guys moving through the system. So now Dome will be a guy that will be getting some starts in that Brooklyn rotation. There's a couple promotions from Brooklyn to Binghamton. Dylan Ross had a 1.54 ERA in 10 appearances. He allowed just 2 earned runs in 11 and 2/3 innings pitched and struck out 23. That's a strikeout per 9 rate of nearly 18. So that's nearly 2 an inning. 17.7 was his strikeout per 9 rate. He did walk 8 batters, so the walk rate a little bit high at 6 batters per 9, but still a potential electric arm. He's been up to 101 miles per hour this year, so the Mets continue to have some arms to get really excited about that could be real pieces for them in the future. I think the Mets are not going to have to rebuild staffs in the offseason too much anymore with all the starting pitching they have coming up, and also a lot of these high-octane relievers who could make this bullpen a lot scarier in a couple of years, where some of these guys with team control and really high-end stuff start to trickle their way up to the big leagues. It could be a huge development for the Mets if some of these arms pan out. Another one is Anthony Nunez, who had a 0.63 ERA in Brooklyn, but he also has a really awesome story. There was a great article in the New York Post. It's under their Sports Plus section, so all of you might not be able to find it behind a paywall, but it was written by Andrew Bataferrano, and he got a lot of quotes from Anthony Nunez's college coach and really just detailing the journey. There's some quotes in here from the scout, quotes from Nunez. Here's the story on Anthony Nunez, who was drafted by the Padres in the 29th round. He was an infielder and signed and played a couple seasons in their farm system, but got cut during the 2021 season. At the time, Nunez thinks that his baseball life is over because he chose to go to pro right out of high school and it didn't work. His mom encouraged him to go back to school. He files an appeal with the NCAA to get some eligibility, and they do grant him 4 years of eligibility to play D2 or D3. He goes to the University of Tampa to play D2. He's their third baseman, and he shines with the glove. He did okay with the bat, but it was a scout that visited the University of Tampa who put Nunez on the radar gun from shortstop and clocked him at over 100 miles per hour. And that's when they realized, okay, maybe this arm should be on the mound and not just a third baseman. He had already been thinking about the prospect of trying to pitch. So he starts throwing on the mound and he hits 97 in a game. And all of a sudden scouts are calling, and he had the ability, if he wanted to sign an MLB contract, or not an MLB contract, but sign a minor league contract and go pro again. He chose to stick around for the 2024 season. It's a good thing he did. His team went on to win the Division II championship, and he was the two-way player the whole time, played a key role as their everyday third baseman while also pitching out of the bullpen. The Mets talked to him, convinced him to sign, that they were the right spot for him to develop as a pitcher. And last year, he began his pro career, or resumed his pro career as a pitcher in the Mets system. Through 10 innings, 2 of them at the Complex League, 8 of them in St. Lucie, allowed 3 runs across those 10 innings, struck out 12, walked 5. This year, he starts in Brooklyn, and he was unhittable, like literally unhittable. Across 10 appearances, he allowed 3 hits, 1 earned run, and 14 1/3 innings pitched. But if you look at what he did early on, through his first 7 appearances, he did not allow a hit or a run. It was his 8th appearance where he finally allowed both a hit and a run, and it was in the second inning of work. His first inning of work, he struck out the side. So here was Anthony Nunez, first full season as a pitcher only, and his first 9 2/3 innings pitch, he did not allow a single hit or a run. So he pitched a no-hitter out of the bullpen for the first couple weeks of the season in Brooklyn and racked up 18 strikeouts along the way. Now he heads up to Double-A to face some tougher competition, but this is another guy that throws hard, has a couple of interesting pitches, a changeup, slider he's working through. Guy that could be a really nice arm for the Mets out of the bullpen at some point. Probably not this year, of course. He still has to develop a ton. He's going to be going up to the upper levels where he'll really get challenged, and I'm sure the numbers won't be quite as good. It's hard to be better than what he did in Brooklyn, but between, you're looking at Nunez, Dylan Ross, Ryan Lambert, who's up to Binghamton. I mean, that's 3 arms right there of really good potential relievers. Trey McLaughlin is up there too. The Mets just have an abundance of wealth when it comes to their pitching prospects now, and that's great on multiple fronts because, yes, you want to keep these guys. You want to bring them through your system. You want to have them debut. But also when you get this much of a surplus in pitching talent, if the Mets need a center fielder at the deadline and Luis Robert is somebody that they want, an arm like an Anthony Nunez might attract the White Sox. It's not going to get the whole deal done, but it might move you closer to the finish line on a deal. Maybe you want Rafi Devers. These are arms that can be sweeteners in trades. I will be talking about those 2 guys in future episodes. The Mets are going to be playing the Red Sox coming up, so we will talk about Devers once that series arrives. They'll play the White Sox coming up soon as well, so we'll talk about Robert then. Guys that have some serious draw when you want to talk trades, but also some setbacks. So those will be fun shows that'll come up in the future. That's going to be all, though, for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you who tuned in. If you want to make sure you don't miss out on those potential trade podcasts or anything else coming your way, make sure you follow, rate, review wherever you get your podcast. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over and check out Locked On MLB Game Night. This is the show that takes you around every single game of the baseball season from the night before with expert analysis from all of our local experts from each team, as well as a couple of hosts that'll take you along the journey each given day. Check out Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.